Antique Sprinklers. We are up to part 4 in our series of episodes about the history of the Buckner Rocker Jet. And originally we'd planned that number 4 would be the last episode in the series, but as Carrie and I were working on it, we realized there was far too much material to shove it all into one episode for this last bit here. We would have ended up talking about 8 different sprinklers and showing them in operation across a total of 3 manufacturers, and we just didn't think that we could do it justice, or that anybody would watch a 2-hour-long episode. So I am happy to announce the following Thursday, after this one is released, we'll be releasing part 5, which we do intend to be the last episode in the series. So stay tuned for that. So why don't we kick off, as we have this entire series, with Carrie just giving a quick rundown of the sprinklers we're going to be talking about.
The next was the 503, which now has the ratchet style gear type incremental arc adjustment. 503, the 512, the 522. These all have the hoop style trip on them with the slip pin. The breakaway style was patented in, I believe, 58. So they went to the breakaway style trip. Still was the 503, 512, 522, all having the breakaway style trip.
These are the sprinklers that succeeded the 502, 511, and 521 that we talked about in our last episode. And it's important to remember that during all of this time, Buckner was still manufacturing that full line of ag rocker jets, that were full circle, the 202, 211, 221, and 250. And I think it would be smart to start by clearing up a couple of items from part 3. Mostly what we need to clear up it relates to the trip mechanism. And so that's why I brought this 511 back into this episode. And so the pinnacle of trip mechanisms for that series still had this knurled sort of thumb screw on it, and the arc stops without the geared teeth on them, and the trip mechanism, this post in front, but also able to be moved completely out of the way. And so that was the very height of reversing technology for that series of sprinklers. Now, Carrie and I kicked around a lot of different thoughts about how we came to see, 502s and 511s and certainly 521s with what looked like a more modern setup. Either the trip mechanism, breakaway end in back, the geared teeth on the arc collars, those kinds of things. And the best we can kind of come up with is, either there was a scenario where at the point of crossover between the production of, say, a 502 and a 503, or a 521 and a 522, you still had levers left over that were stamped 503 or 502 or 521. And so you were putting those on sprinklers that had the more modern arc stops that newer series was going to be using. And you see some funny things. So for example, Carrie has this great sprinkler that the lever started out intended for a 502 anyway. And you can see where they scratched the 2 off and carved a 3 in its place. And then I'm using this as a 522 for our purposes here. It has a breakaway arc stop in back, the trip mechanism, and it has the geared teeth for the arc collars, but certainly the 521 was never meant to have that. So either they had some 521 levers left to use up, or at some point in this sprinkler's life, somebody just changed the lever on it, which certainly can be done. I only know a couple of people today that would undertake doing that, a handful anyway. Back in the day, many, many, many more people could do that kind of operation. And so to me, it's got to be one or the other. Either they were using up old inventory and didn't want to scrap a bunch of aluminum levers, or over the course of the lives of some of these sprinklers, parts just got swapped out on them. So I think it's great that we're talking about the arc stops when it comes to the 503, the 512, and the 522, because that's really their primary differentiator from the other line. There were other. To really adequately talk about this, not only do we need to discuss John Royer, but we have to add two more characters into the mix. William Kimbro and Edwin McElhenie. So William Kimbro had been born in Texas in 1916 and came to Fresno after World War II. And by the 1950s, he was the production manager for Buckner. And he'd patented the original bearing that the rocker jets Buckner made used. And it was that sandcast bearing that that Carrie showed you in our last episode. And then a couple of years later, working with John Royer, he helped develop what they called in the patent a thrust bearing, which became marketed by Buckner as their GDG bearing. And they were very proud of that. It showed up a lot in their ag sprinklers, and certainly the rocker jets made mention of having the GDG bearing on them. And of course, we have to mention John Royer again, because he is the person who patented these arc stops that have the teeth on them. And they were called an adjustable finger unit, or some kind of strange name on the patent. I'll put it up on the screen. And they create sort of a positive stop. Whereas, the former method with the knurled thumb screw on it that would cause the collars to move a little bit as they were tightened down. And if that thumb screw came a little loose, they could get pushed, or and the arc adjustment could change. And in this case, that wasn't going to happen. Now, sometimes you'll see that the little tabs on those collars can get bent. These things got some rough treatment. On the smaller version, they had, crazily enough, plastic collars for a period of time. And maybe this is something that the viewers can help with. Carrie and I, in talking about that, wondered whether it was a cost savings measure, or whether they thought it was better to strip one of those collars than to have something more expensive or harder to replace break. In any event, we've never seen them on any of the larger sprinklers at all. And then we need to come to the third person in our discussion today, Edwin Melaney. And he was born in Jackson, Michigan in 1919. And before the war, worked in a machine shop there in Michigan. And after the war, came to Fresno. And by the 1950s, he was listed in the city directory as an inspector at Buckner. And his innovation is this breakaway trip that allows you to go full circle simply by slipping this lever up out of the way. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. The other thing is it's kind of a safety thing. If you push that trip hard enough against there, it will flip up instead of wrecking the trip mechanism. So somebody coming along grabbing a sprinkler and twisting it, or it, getting pressure on it, or pushed on, or thrown into a cart, something like that. It's meant to be a safety feature, as well as technically being a little easier and a little faster than pushing that pin up out of the way to go to full circle. This is another spot where they used plastic parts on this. This is my 511, and I can only think of that as being plastic, given that it's meant to be breakaway, as just like a very small cost-saving measure or something like that. But again, would love to hear what you think in the comments. Both William and Edwin worked for Buckner for a number of years. William went on to have a couple of patents with Western Brass, owned by Walter Storm. But they both stayed in Fresno their whole lives. I think William had a place up on Bass Lake, which is maybe an hour kind of northeast there in the mountains, in a pretty area. And they both passed right around the turn of the century, somewhere right around the year 2000. So we've lost access to some of the guys who really knew these sprinklers inside and out. And that's why we're really happy to be just, pooling our understanding of it and trying to create some kind of history around these things that we can hold on to. And the last thing to mention as I bring up the quick couplers, these actually predate the Rainbird Turfbirds as a lightweight quick coupler sprinkler for large turf applications. And there's no question that that's what Rainbird was going after, the exact same market of golf courses, athletic fields, parks, cemeteries, etc., with a sprinkler that was lightweight enough to carry a bunch of them around as you're, the night waterman working with them, but also that effectively covered the same areas that these cover. So it makes me wonder a little bit if that turf bird wasn't a reaction to the Rocker Jet, but I think we need to give Buckner primacy in going after that market first. You know, the 503 still had this one-piece nozzle assembly with the diffuser screw in the end of it, and it was just one piece of bronze, and it was drilled out to be a nozzle and threaded on the back end. And then in the larger sizes, the 512 and the 522, they had something they called their spray maker nozzle. And this had actually been introduced on the previous series of sprinklers and continued with this group here. And you could either have just the brass nozzle itself, or you could have this spray maker option. And I think they actually sold it standard with it. But by taking this screw off, this whole assembly will slip off of the nozzle. By having it on, you have a diffuser pin, of course. And I think these diffuser pins are beautiful. They're yellow brass, and they just sparkle when you shine them up. So you could get these marketed to you in a number of different ways. You know, the very smallest one could end up on a butterfly base. The 512 you could get on a Buckner wheelbase, like I have here, or on one of their heart-shaped stands. But truly, by the time you get up to the 512 and definitely the 522, they had quick coupler keys in mind. And we're going to show you a couple of ways that these things operated, either on a tripod, or I'll show you on the wheelbase here. I wanted to remind you, as always, if you haven't yet, please hit thumbs up. That is the thing that tells YouTube to show this video to some more people. And as always, I know I speak for Carrie when I say we really appreciate you watching, and especially all the great comments and the interesting questions and observations that we get at the end of making these videos. So again, thanks for watching.
Here we have the first generation 503. This head has the notched gear tube type arc stop, and you will notice it has the slip pin on the trip. Have the second generation Buckner 503. This one has the breakaway trip. This particular one actually has a plastic breakaway trip lever. Kind of unusual. I believe this came out in the late 50s. When they applied for patent on the breakaway trip. This head also is available at the end of the production line with the baffle style anti-backsplash nozzle. Here's station 22, a 522, and first and second generation 512. One breakaway trip, one slip pin trip. This head here has the breakaway trip. Again, this is to facilitate easier use, turning it full part circle when installing and removing quick couplers, as well as a safety measure to prevent stripping out the tooth locked arc stop. There's another 512. We got the slit pin trip. This would be the first generation. And here we have the 522. It's a breakaway trip, later style head.